Hi, so I'm going to be talking about the nervous system, which is chapter 7. And first, we will review the main concepts of what the nervous system does. So, sensory input, it uses your senses to gather information. So, is it really bright? Do you need your pupils need to get smaller? Is it really cold? Do you need to have goosebumps? That type of thing. Is there a threat coming at me? This marker's coming at my face. I need to blink. Whatever. So your sensory input is just gathering information. That's all it is. Your integration center, that is where, is it a reflex? Do I need to process this information? Is there action needed? And then the motor output, that would be, I'm blinking because this is coming at me. I'm having goosebumps because I am cold, that type of thing. So that is your response. So although it happens so fast you can't even think about it, those are the 3 steps. First, there is a ball coming at me. I'm noticing that sensory. Integration, processing. Do I do something with this? Well, if it's reflex, you don't even think about it. It just goes to your spinal cord. Motor output. Okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to blink. I'm going to put my hands up. I'm going to run away. That type of thing. All right, so your central nervous system is made up of your brain and spinal cord, which makes sense because it's central nervous system. And your peripheral nervous system, your PNS, is made up of your nerves outside the brain and spinal cord. So you have your brain and your spinal cord right here. That's the central nervous system and all the neurons that lead to and from it, all down your body and whatnot. That would be your peripheral nervous system. So your peripheral nervous system, there's pictures directly out of your book, is the afferent sensory division. Afferent goes toward the brain and spinal cord, and efferent goes away from. So afferent is in the beginning of the alphabet, starts with the A, so it goes toward, and then efferent starts with the E, it goes away. So you can see right here. If I write on here, here's your sensor, you're noticing bright light or whatever. So it goes toward, afferent, A goes toward, and then processes the information here, sends a response in your legs to run away or whatever, efferent. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna sneeze. So nerve fibers that carry information to the central nervous system are called sensory neurons or afferent. Oopsies, now look what I did. The motor or efferent division, that's the nerve fibers that carry impulses away. I just told you that, from the central nervous system. So sensory, go toward, motor, go away. And there's somatic, the nervous system, that's voluntary. So I'm going to catch the ball, I'm going to run, that type of thing. The autonomic nervous system, that's involuntary, like digesting your food and things like that. All right, so this is a flow chart that's in your textbook. The central nervous system, your brain and spinal cord, right? That is in the center. So here you have your afferent neurons, your sensory neurons. They send the impulse to your brain and spinal cord where it's processed. So once it's processed, then it sends it back to the motor neuron right here, which is efferent. That can either be autonomic, which is involuntary, which helps to do with your heart beating and your lungs breathing and your digestive system and your adrenal glands, things like that. If it's somatic, that means it's voluntary, so that's your skeletal muscles because you can control those. So you have this neuron, and I'm going to go to the next slide. I can come back. Okay. So you have this neuron here, right? This is the cell body. The cell body encloses the nucleus, and it has these dendrites here. So here are the dendrites. These are these branches. They bring the impulse toward the neuron. So the impulse goes, you can see the black arrows, but it comes this way into the dendrites, into the cell body. Okay. Cell body is the nucleus. Nucleus is control center of the cell. Okay, so process it, and then it sends it down this axon. The axon is the white tube. The Schwann cells cover the white tube, and they're made up of the myelin sheath. So these are all Schwann cells here. Schwann cell, Schwann cell, Schwann cell, Schwann cell. See, it says one Schwann cell. Notice they don't touch. There's a gap there. That gap is called the node of Ranvier, and that's necessary to help with the impulse. So the axon is the yellow underneath the Schwann cells. The Schwann cells are made up of a myelin sheath. Have you ever seen a fruit by the foot? and how that's wrapped up really tight. That's how a Schwann cell is made. It's like a fruit by the foot. It's wrapped up really, really tight. And think about a big, I don't know, hammer going. Why do you have a hammer? Oh, my daughter, something broke, so I had to use a hammer. Okay, so say I have fruit by the foot around this, a whole bunch of fruit by the foot. That would be basically how a neuron is. This could be the cell body. See the dendrites going in. Then at the end is the axon terminals. And we learned last chapter, neurotransmitters are released from axon terminals. Okay, now I'm going to go back and talk about the other slides. All right, so the Schwann cells, they form the myelin sheath forms the Schwann cells. It's the protection. Neuron is a nerve cell. They're used to transmit messages, and like I said, the cell body encloses the nucleus, and then the processes are the fibers that extend. The dendrites go toward the cell body, the axon goes away from it. All right, so we already talked that. And they only won't go in one direction, kind of like a train can only go in one direction, because what would happen if a train come from this direction on the same tracks as this one? Oh my gosh, lots of things would fly off the tracks, lots of big mess, and people would die. It'd be super sad. So the neuron can only travel in one direction. That's it, one direction. It has to be reset before I can go again. I forgot my dominoes. Okay, so axons end at axon terminals, and that's where the neurotransmitters are released. And there's a synaptic cleft between them, which we talked about. So right here, this is the end of an axon. Each of these vesicles hold neurotransmitters. And depending upon the job they need to be done, we're going to talk about skeletal muscle activity because that's the voluntary one we just talked about in chapter 6. So if there is, do you guys remember what it's called? What the neurotransmitter is called that stimulates skeletal muscle? Do you remember? You remember? ACH. Very good, acetylcholine. So then once it gets the impulse, reaches here, gets to the end, and it gets the go-ahead, then it'll release all these neurotransmitters, right? And if the neurotransmitter we want to be released is ACH, acetylcholine, it'll then go into here and to the skeletal muscle, and then it'll cause the muscle to contract. And this gap right here that I just told you, this space here, see how they don't touch? That's called the synaptic, because it's at the synapse cleft. Cleft is a gap. So synaptic cleft is what that's called. There's my arrow. All right, so this is a great video, so you can go back. It's 1 minute long, but it shows you how the myelin goes around the fruit, or like the fruit by the foot goes around this hammer. So basically it just shows you the tighter it is, the better it is. And it gives you good reactions. So that's why teenagers, there's your prime on your reaction and your movement and whatever, your response. Like if you do a basketball drill or wrestle or whatever, your response, reaction rate, that's the word I was looking for, is the best when you're a teenager. And it's slower. Have you ever played catch with a 3-year-old? It's great. You're like, here, catch. And then so they get the ball thrown at them and they're like, so it drops, ball drops, and they're like, because the reaction time is so bad. Oh my gosh. So then you teach them to do this so that you just throw it into their hands and then they catch it. So it gets better and better as you get older. And then when you're a teenager, it's the best it ever is. And then it goes down. So no matter how awesome I am, because I'm pretty awesome, you probably would have a better reaction rate than I would because I'm older than you. So that's something to keep in mind. The nodes of Rodmier are gaps in the myelin sheath along the axon, which I already talked about. In multiple sclerosis, the myelin sheath is destroyed, and you really need that for the reaction to occur. This myelin sheath hardens to a tissue, and that's where you get the word sclerosis. It's an autoimmune disease, and then it affects the muscles because then the reaction can't get there, or it gets there so slowly. So if you want to pick something up, it takes even longer if it can even get there, because the impulse can't go if there's no myelin sheath, because that insulation helps to transmit the impulse. So it's really important to have that. Most neurons are found in the found in the central nervous system. So that'd be your brain and your spinal cord. Gray matter, that's where the cell bodies and unmyelinated fibers are found. That's called gray matter. And the nuclei are clusters of cell bodies within the white matter. So basically the axon would make up the gray matter and the cell bodies would make up the white matter. And ganglia are clusters of nerve cells outside the central nervous system. Right, we already talked about this, but sensory are also called afferent. It's so fun when they have two names. You have to know both of them. The sensory goes toward the brain and spinal cord, and then you have interneuron that's found in the brain and spinal cord. They're also called association because they associate the sensory with the motor. And the motor neurons carry impulses away from the central nervous system. This is the association neuron I was talking about. They're found in the brain and spinal cord. They connect the sensory and the motor. Because remember, there's a one-way system. I love this picture. It's so great. I'd study it. Probably on your test. Okay, so what happens? I'll draw on here, even though there's already arrows. Yeah, pen's great. Okay, so here's the dendrites, right? So, like, if you have, say, we're talking about, you see something, okay, and you're like, ooh, you see your favorite dessert, special K-bar. Sorry, you guys call them scotcheroos in this state. Scotcheroos, pecan pie, chocolate cake, whatever your favorite is, and you see that, right? So that sends that message through the afferent neuron. It's called afferent, toward the brain and spinal cord. It's also called the sensory neuron. So it sends it toward the brain and spinal cord. Oh, shnikes. And so the blue one goes toward the brain and spinal cord. And then once it gets to the brain and spinal cord, it reaches the interneuron. And notice it's a lot shorter because it's in the spinal cord, which is the size of your thumb, or it goes to your brain. And so the association neuron or the interneuron associates sensory with motor, or it's the interneuron because it connects the two. And then that's where the processing, the integration center is. Like, what am I going to do about this chocolate cake, this pecan pie? What am I going to do about it? Am I going to go get it? Am I going to just ignore it because I don't like sweets? What am I going to do? Okay. So then whatever your brain decides to do, in this case, it's going to decide to go get a fork, and it sends the message back to the afferent neuron, motor neuron, and it's going to be like, dude, I'm going to eat me some of this pecan pie. Actually, I'm going to heat it with the microwave first. I'm going to put whipped cream on it. Then I'm going to eat it because it's amazing. Super bad for you, but amazing. Same with scotcheroos. Super bad for you, but amazing. I don't like chocolate cake, so I'm not going to eat that. I would just let that go. So my efferent neuron would be like, I don't care. So I wouldn't respond. So sensory neurons go toward the brain and spinal cord. Motor neurons go away from the brain and spinal cord. Motor neurons are, once they hit the muscles and glands are called effectors. Okay. All right, there's different types of neurons. Multipolar is the most common type. That's when we talk about a neuron, that's when we talk about is a multipolar neuron. Lots of extensions from the cell body, one axon. Bipolar, one axon and one dendrite. They're super rare. They're found in your nose and stuff. And then the unipolar have a short single process leaving the body. All right, so that is it in a nutshell. Now you're going to do your assignment, which I posted to Google Classroom. Let me know if you have any questions.